And I am going to pass the microphone to Richard Stowe. Take it away, Richard.
Okay, well, thank you, Linda, and thank you, Dr. Motta, for participating in our April monthly meeting. Dr. Motta, I first really got to know him when we were working, we members of Dark Sky Lake Worth and some commissioners were working on getting 2,700 Kelvin lighting for the city of Lake Worth through a contract at Siemens. And he received, Dr. Motta received his Doctor of Medicine from Tufts University School of Medicine in 1978. In 1983, he started working at North Shore Medical Center and founded the research department at North Shore, and he served as chair from 1990 to 2010. His interest in the effects of artificial light at night was really stimulated by the research done by Dr. Richard Stevens, a esteemed researcher at the University of Connecticut. In 2010, he was elected president of the Massachusetts Medical Center, served 2 years there. In the meantime, in 2008, for 8 years, he was involved on the AMA's, the American Medical Association's Council of Science and Public Health. He became a trustee of American Medical Association in 2018 and served out one term until 2022. And among all that, he got involved with the International Dark Sky Association, serving on their board from 2010 to 2015 for about 6 years. And then got involved with a UN treaty on, what initially started out as light pollution, but then it's really everything to do with what's going on in outer space. And so it's about protecting, the sky, if you will. And while he's doing all that, he served as an associate professor in medicine since 1993. So Mario, why don't you take it from there?
Okay. Thank you. Let me share my screen, I guess. I noticed that you had a slide up, Linda, of the Everglades. Just a month ago, I gave a talk in the Everglades on pretty much anything I'm talking about tonight. And I've given a number of talks to the National Park Service and have worked with the various environmental organizations like yours in Massachusetts and across the country, such as the Audubon Society, as well as yours. So what I'll talk about tonight is outdoor lighting and how it got to AMA recommendations and UN recommendations. You might ask, what does the a medical society care about lighting? But hopefully by the end of the talk, you will understand why we took a stand on outdoor lighting because of environmental and human health effects. Why isn't it advancing? Hold on. There we go. Whoops. There we go. So I'm board certified in cardiology. Richard already gave you a background, so I will skip this and move on. This dirty little secret, why I'm really got started in dark sky efforts in the late 1980s was because I'm interested in astronomy. I build my own telescopes. I'll throw in a few photos. In fact, the one behind me is a photo I took last fall. And this is the back of my house. I It's a 32-inch f6.5 telescope that I completely handmade, including grinding all the optics and making all the parts. So I want to keep my sky looking nice, and I was interested in light pollution for that reason at first. But then, that's my 32-inch telescope, by the way.
Mhm.
And that's an image of 891 through the telescope. So in the 1980s, Richard mentioned him. He was an epidemiologist at the University of Connecticut. And the job of an epidemiologist is to make connections on illnesses as to what may be causing them. So I started reading some of his material, and it intrigued me. And around 1990, met him, and we discussed how we could help each other out. And it began a lifelong mutual association. He unfortunately died just a few years ago, but he's left a legacy, and many of his predictions have been proven true. So why did Richard Stevens get involved in light pollution so far back? So if you notice the rate of breast cancer here, it's highest in North America, and it's lowest in China at that time. This is from 1990 when this slide was made. So he looked at that and was trying to figure out why Americans have so much higher rates of breast cancer. And he, at the time, everyone just assumed, well, we have pollution and it's got to be toxins in our drink or food or air that's causing that. But notice, you can see my arrow, right? Here, we don't have that bad of a pollution problem as China. If you want to pick the worst polluted area on Earth, it's China, even back then. So he said it can't be toxins and it can't be air and water pollution. He studied all these areas and finally realized this is an exact graph for the amount of lighting. Now, he reasoned that since lighting suppresses melatonin, that this had something to do with suppressing melatonin. He had no proof at the time, but he threw that out, and he had a number of epidemiologic associations, and he made a number of predictions. So here's light pollution in the world. Notice it's the industrialized countries. India's catching up. And at the time, China was pretty dark. So, but they gradually have caught up. They've become industrialized. And what intrigued them as well is Chinese women who immigrated to the US then had the same risk as Americans. And so it had something to do with North America. Here's Florida, by the way, and your light pollution. And you got to understand, it's not just where the lights are. The light travels laterally, especially if it's unshielded. So here's the real effect of your South Florida light pollution. It spreads wide and far, including into the Everglades. And as well, we'll discuss, that affects the environment and animals and even plants. So here we have dark sky observing, but there's really only one place that is reasonably dark. And even there you have, I've been there, you have light domes from Miami and from Naples. So this is from Shark Valley, pretty well light polluted, not a place to observe very, very well. Here is Big Cypress. You see those light domes on either side. And in the middle area looking south, you've got some probably border 3 or 4 sky. The other thing about light pollution, it's incredibly wasteful. Lights that aren't shielded shine up into space. So we're basically paying the electric company to light up the moon and the satellites going across us. If you shield them, and the light gets redirected down, all that wasted light goes back down to the ground where it belongs, so it bounces off something. The whole purpose of a light is not to see the light, but to bounce off something so you can see that object. Anytime light goes directly into your eye, you're actually diminishing your ability to see. It's called veiling, and it allows it limits what you can see at night. So we waste, now this is waste $7 billion annually. This is in one state. And the US is far behind the European Union, which is now starting to really take this seriously. For example, in the Czech Republic, it's a national law. All lights now are fully shielded. So light pollution affects human health. It affects circadian rhythm, that much most people know. So you don't sleep as well at night, and you notice that when you change time zones. But what's more important is melatonin suppression inhibits the immune system. And I'll talk a bit about that because that's where most of the serious effects on human health occur, as well as almost all mammals on Earth. So you have, because of immune suppression, you have endocrine-related carcinomas, such as breast, prostate, thyroid, and pancreatic. And there's a question on colorectal. The studies just aren't as robust as the others yet. So all those cancers increase wherever there's light pollution. Everyone listening right now produces 5 to 10 cancer cells every day. You've been doing that all your life. Why aren't we all dead? The reason is because we have a robust immune system, which diminishes, unfortunately, as you get older, which is why elderly people tend to have more cancers than young people. But the bad cells, we produce millions and millions of cell divisions every day. You're not the same person you were 2 months ago. Basically, all your cells except for your neurons are completely new. And in all those divisions, it's not a stretch of the imagination to think some of those divisions will go haywire and not correctly. Some of those, most of them will die on their own because they're not viable, but some of them are viable and will proliferate indefinitely. That's a cancer. And we do 5 or 10 of those a day. But the immune system goes around while we sleep when melatonin is high and searches these out and kills them. So we'll talk about that. Then you have mood and depression, psychiatric disorders, increase in obesity and diabetes, increase in coronary events and carotid disease, new recent study, by the way. And finally, there's glare, which creates dangerous conditions for drivers and pedestrians. And finally, loss of our nocturnal environment, and that affects the environment. Every animal on Earth is affected by a badly lit sky. So in a live audience, I always ask how many people have trouble driving at night. I would imagine a good number of you have that problem. Okay? It's not your fault. It's bad engineering. Okay, there is no reason to have lights hanging down, unshielded, shining in your eye. Whenever that happens, your pupils constrict, so everything looks dark because your pupils are now constricted and you don't see as well. Plus the glare that goes into your eye cause what we call veiling disability, so you don't see the road well. People have been killed because they don't know someone's crossing a crosswalk. Okay, and lawsuits are starting to occur because of that. There is no reason for this. You can design good lights and they cost the same as buying a bad light. So let's talk about melatonin. It's a very primitive hormone. For some reason, amoeba make melatonin. No one knows why. It's certainly not related to immune system. They don't have one. It's not related to their brain. They don't have one. Okay, but I'm pointing out that even single-celled animals make this. It's very primitive. It's been around a long time. But as animals evolve, certain structures get co-opted and used for other things. For example, feathers did not evolve so birds can fly. They evolved so animals can keep warm before fur and mammals. But that proved useful for birds to fly. Same thing with melatonin. Whatever reason it got evolved for, in humans and mammals at least, it's extremely useful to help the immune system at night when we sleep and regulate our 24-hour cycle. So melatonin is known as an oncostase. It means it takes care of oxidative stress. It helps diminish metastases of cancers, and it stimulates T cell and B cell activity. Now, let me state that right from the beginning. Light does not cause cancer, okay? But the cancers that we produce naturally are killed by the T and B cells, and then monocytes come and eat them and destroy them. But the melatonin is an adjuvant to help this along. It stimulates them to work properly. So if you think of it that way, it should be no stretch of the imagination that if your melatonin is suppressed a little bit, then just a few more percentage of those bad cells will sneak through, and now you have a cancer. And that's the current theory of how lighting allows cancers to develop. Because melatonin is a hormone, it seems particularly acute with hormonally related cancers, such as breast and prostate. Now, if you think I'm making this up, 2017, the Nobel Prize in Medicine went to Hall, Rosbash, and Young, specifically because they figured out the biochemical pathway, how all this occurs. So at least the Nobel Prize thinks this is pretty important. Here is their biochemical pathway. I'm not going to go through this. I just want you to know this is well worked out now. This is not a theory. This is not a hypothesis. This is science with literally thousands of paper behind it and a Nobel Prize because of it. So a person in the Netherlands worked out that we're not, because humans have variability, not everyone's the same. Some people are low sensitivity people and some are high. So we don't all react to light at night exactly the same. But in population studies, it is a significant effect. And on average, what I'm going to describe in papers is primarily the average, but some get worse, some get a little better. What is the problem? Here is the problem. There is no such thing as a white LED, okay? So how do we have white LEDs? You take a blue LED, you coat it with a phosphor, kind of like a fluorescent light on the inside, and the blue gets absorbed by the phosphor and then re-emitted in a more useful wavelength, the reds and the greens and the yellows, etc. The problem is there's always leakage of the blue. So depending on the color temperature of the blue light, some of it's going to get through. And as you're going to show you, it's the blue light that causes almost all the damage. Blue is extremely energetic. It causes macular problems in the eye. It causes the disability glare, and it causes most of the melatonin suppression. So a lot of the lighting companies started putting out even 5,000 K LEDs, especially Audis for a few years ago were putting out 5 and even 6,000 K LED. Those are the cars that you immediately go like this because you're completely blinded. A lot of those are 4,000 and 5,000 K LEDs. You don't want those on the road. Unfortunately, the car companies were given independence and are not regulated by the Department of Transportation, believe it or not. So it's the yellows, reds that are the useful light that don't blind us. don't cause as much. Any intense light, if it's intense enough, will cause damage. But blue causes 10 times as much damage as red. Now here is, when you see them side by side, it's easy to see what a 6000 K LED looks like and a 2700 K. They all look white. There is no reason you need intense blue white like this. They're all white. It's not until you get below 2000 you start noticing a color shift to the human eye. If this is what you have at night, you'll think it's a white light. The lighting companies, unfortunately, the manufacturers 10 years ago, started making 4,000 to 5,000 K because they didn't have good coatings back then. And and companies don't like to change their product unless they're forced to. Okay, so there's still a lot of the bad lighting out there. And unfortunately for Florida, Florida Power and Light is one of the least responsive lighting companies in the country, followed close behind by Duke in North Carolina. Most of the other lighting companies have caught on. And I think your job is to convince Florida Power and Light, get with the program in the rest of the states. So here's the problem. If this red line here is the peak of melatonin suppression. It just so happens that's 4,500 nanometers, which is exactly the wavelength of a blue LED. So depending on how good the coating is, for example, 2700 K the red has this much blue leakage. A 5000 K has this much blue leakage. So this is called color correlated temperature. Why they use this archaic system, I don't know. Let me explain what that means though. If you take an iron and put it in a fire, it'll gradually glow infrared, then dull red, and then if it's hot enough, it'll glow into the yellow. You have to get really hot to get it into the blue. That's a color temperature based on 1800s. For some reason, the lighting companies use that, even though it has nothing to do with fire and the LEDs are completely cool to the touch. That's what these numbers come from. Okay, so they should come up with a different numbering system, but that's what we're stuck with, and that's what you'll see when you buy an LED light. Now, this high blue in 5000 K, you'd never want inside your house. Those are grow lights. Okay, if you don't believe me, buy one, put it in your house, take the shade off. You will instantly smash it with a hammer because it is so awful to stand next to. In a house, you'd want 2400, 2700. In an office building, you'd go 3000 K because at that point it's daylight and you want daylight if you're working. So how does this suppress melatonin? It turns out melatonin regulates 10% of all our genes. So if you suppress melatonin and 10% of your genes don't get regulated properly, it's no stretch of the imagination, you're going to have some health issues. Back in 2003, it turned out there was a special type of cone in our eyes that has nothing to do with vision. We have 3 cones that's red, green, and blue, and we have rods for night vision. But there's this other that has nothing to do with vision, but the fibers for vision all go back to the back of the brain where we actually see. These fibers from this particular RGC goes to the pineal gland, and there its only purpose is to suppress the pineal gland, which makes all our melatonin in the brain. Okay, so as soon as that fiber sees blue light, it suppresses the melatonin. Now, there are good reasons why we evolved that way. When we lived in caves, okay, you needed to wake up when the sun rose. The sky's blue, it's saying wake up, and the purpose of this mechanism was to wake us up, basically. And it then causes the what's called the limbic system to activate the brain and say, time to get up and get moving. Same thing happens today if the sunshine is shining into your bedroom, right? But at night, you don't want the pineal gland suppressed. You don't want your brain activated. You want to be able to go to sleep. Shut off all blue lights at least an hour before you go to bed. You won't have to take sleeping pills. It's that simple. So, I remember I put this slide at the previous talk. One of the lighting company people said, well, we have evidence that there's plenty of melatonin in your salivary glands. And that's true. Okay, but it's not the one that suppresses your brain.
Mhm.
I have no idea what it's doing in the salivary gland, but it makes its own. But they based their questions on a study of salivary gland melatonin. If that comes up with you, there are multiple studies that show, what happened to that? I'm sorry, I may have gotten rid of the follow-up, but there are several studies for conciseness, I took those out, sorry. But there are studies that prove that salivary gland melatonin has nothing to do with pineal gland melatonin, which is what's important as far as we're concerned here. So street lighting on road casualties and crime in England and Wales. Why am I picking them? Because there were very few studies in the US. I'll point out a couple of them, but England has done an enormous amount of work on this and they published it all. And there's little evidence of any harmful effects for shutting off lights on roads or collisions or crime. In fact, it's helpful. 14 years of data, by the way, went into this, 62 local authorities. So when you switch off the lights, if anything, the roads get safer. Anything to the left is better. Partial night light, meaning a dim at a certain time, like 10 o'clock. And that's a very useful thing we could do here. Much better than having the lights on all night. Oh, hi, Eric.
Right.
So crime, you'll hear this a lot. You got to put up all these lights for crime. Well, when you switch off the lights, the crime actually goes down, and even in partial lights. Okay, and I've been giving talks on light pollution for 30 years now, and it always comes up. Someone asks, well, we need the lights for crime. And my response to that is, I have many studies that show the lighting does not prevent crime. Give me one study that shows that it does. I've been waiting 30 years, no one's produced one. Let that sink in. I base all my reports on science. Anything I say is peer-reviewed data that's published. Keep the lighting companies to the same standard. Okay, street lighting and road safety. No evidence of association between reduced lighting and nighttime collisions. Brighter street lights cause more accidents. That's because you're blinded and you don't see obstructions in the road, or with some of these cars, you're actually blinded and don't know if you're going to hit something or that other car. It's great for the person driving, not so good for everyone else. This is M81. It's a image I've taken through my telescope, you saw. So let's talk about glare in the human eye. This is a dilated eye. This is what your eye should look like in dim light. Like when you're driving, it should be darker, right? It's 7 millimeters. But if you have an unshielded light or a headlight that's shining right at your eye, that'll constrict down to 2, maybe 1 millimeter. So and if you do the math, for the amount of area that light's coming in, you're now seeing 1/50th, 1/50th of the amount of light. So naturally, everything looks dark. Okay, so, and then most people think, well, everything looks dark around me, so we got to put up more lights, which makes the problem worse. So, in medicine, I'm trained as a researcher that before I give anyone a medication or a procedure, I test it out and make sure it does what it's supposed to do. And I challenge the lighting companies to do the same thing. If you're going to produce a light to put on our streets, make sure it's not causing harm and make sure it's actually doing what you're saying it's doing. That is, make the streets safer and allow you to see better. Many of our lights, especially in Florida, don't do that. They actually obstruct vision and don't allow you to see well at night. So I just call that bad engineering. So here's the cutaway of the human eye, goes through the cornea, the lens, focuses on the back of the eye, and the fovea is where you have your precision vision. Here's an actual human cadaver eye. Now, as we get older, we start developing microcalcifications in the lens. Eventually, it might coalesce into a cataract. This is inevitable. It happens to everyone over 40. Nothing you can do to prevent it. And the reason is the human eye grows like an onion. Every year there's another layer. And it gets thick enough that eventually it doesn't, these muscles that pull on it to allow you to see up close, it's too thick to make that work effectively. Now you need reading glasses. But more importantly, all the nutrients to keep the cells alive is absorbed by the liquid around the lens. Eventually, the lens gets thick enough, generally in your 40s, certainly by your 50s, that the cells in the center don't get enough nutrients and they start dying. And when they die, they calcify. That's the origin of the microcalcifications. And by the time you're in your 70s or 80s, they might coalesce into a cataract. Those microcalcifications, even in your 40s, though, cause scatter. Light goes through, hits microcalcifications and scatters. And that makes vision worse when you have unshielded lights. Nothing you can do about it. This is the way we're made. We weren't designed to live to 95. So if you're young and healthy and you got a bright beam, yeah, you'll get some disability glare, but you can overcome it because you don't have as much scatter. If you're 72 like me, or in your 50s and 60s, this is what you see, okay? The roads are unsafe. That's bad engineering if it causes us to have unsafe roads. Here is another way to put it. So when you're 20, it takes about 2,000 foot Lamberts to cause disability glare. When you're by age 60, it only takes 1/3, maybe about 450, which is why older people have a harder time driving at night. Again, not your fault. The lighting company should take human biology into account when they make their product. And here's another way to do it down here. We all know when the sun sets, it turns red. Why does it turn red? Because the blue scatters more as it goes through a lower atmosphere and the blue scatters out. That's why the sky's blue. The blue scatters. Okay, but in a human eye, it's exactly the same thing as it goes through the aqueous humor of the eye. This is a log scale, by the way, so it's actually much greater than what this appears. So it's a log. Anyways, blue scatters much more than red, and that's why blue light causes more disability glare. It's in our physiology, and the lighting companies need to take that into account when they design a product. So here's a recent study. It's been known for 10 years that severely blue lights might actually cause damage to the human eye. This just came out in JAMA just recently, about a month ago. All my studies are from published papers, peer-reviewed. So they studied 126,000 people over a few years. And what they did is measure how much macular degeneration that occurs. And it turns out that if you live in a light polluted area, you're going to have more, and blue lights especially, you're going to have more macular degeneration. It accelerates it. Now we have I never used to list that because most of the studies were just a few thousand people. This is now robust enough that I think it's a valid study. And here is the actual data, and you can see that as you get more and more blue light, you get, this is outdoor light, by the way, you get more and more macular degeneration. So glare interferes with good vision. Unshielded light can basically give you veiling illuminance, and shielded lighting changes the whole thing. It's like the difference between a dirty windshield and a not dirty windshield. So here's another good example. In fact, this one's from Florida. So here's a typical, stereotypical security light, which is anything but. Look over at the door, just put your hand in front, and without that light shining directly in your eye, now you can see better. That's why all light should be shielded. You actually improve your vision. Lights work only by, you see by a light photon bouncing off something, then go into your eye, not if it goes directly into your eye. So here's another good example for my friends in Quebec. Their rules are the same as US. At intersections, you have to have a light, but this is unshielded. So look at the road. Can you see anything beyond where the light's shining? Now watch this. Someone steps forward 5 feet. If you're traveling down this road at 50 miles per hour, which is the speed limit on this road, and that person's in the road, you're going to kill that person, or you're going to hit a deer, or you're going to hit a parked car. And it's not your fault. It's because of bad lighting. We shouldn't have to tolerate that. Unfortunately, even if you put up good lights, many of these lighting companies put up these monstrosities that have way too many point sources, and that's harmful to the human eye. Human can tolerate, it's a measurement, 50,000 nits. Some of these give off 125 million. These are the lights that make you go like this, and you can't see. In fact, I know people who wear sunglasses or blue block lights at night so they can see better and drive better at night, right? How insane a country are we if you have to wear sunglasses at night? Think about that. There's no reason for that. So here is a light that's on my street when I got my town to adopt lighting. Notice it's 19 watts. It should be 15 because it replaced 60-watt high-pressure sodium. There's a 4-to-1 correlation between high-pressure sodium and LED lighting. So 19 was the lowest they made. That's what they put up, okay? Unfortunately, many city councils don't understand that 4-to-1 ratio. So they have a 60-watt high-pressure sodium. The lighting company that does not want to lose its ability to sell electricity at night will say, well, we got these 50 watts for you and they're plenty bright enough. Oh, sure they are. They're 4 times brighter than what you started with, okay? So you lost the ability to save money by cutting down on electric costs. Whatever you're replacing, divide it by 4, that's the wattage you should be demanding. And they should be fully shielded. Notice this has a shield around it. Here is lighting installation. When it got replaced with shielded proper lighting, you get this. Which street would you rather walk down or drive down? Okay. It's night and day when you see it in live. In Gloucester, there was, how I convinced the city council is very simple. I knew that there was a lot of accidents in certain intersections. This particular place had 20 accidents per year. Okay, so I asked for a list of all the lights in town and where they had the highest accident rate. So this is a church, Cape Ann Church, Catholic church, and it has a school next to it, okay, Catholic school. And they have this, quote, security light on top, shining across. Can you see anything down below? This security light doesn't do a damn thing, except blind drivers who are coming as you know, facing this area. There is a street light right about here. It doesn't light up. Why? Because the light sensor on it is constantly seeing what it thinks is daylight. So the only lights on the intersection that would light up the intersection are shut off by this security light. And this security light is so bright it blinds people. No wonder this has the highest accident rate in the city. It took a little while, but they convinced the town to get them to take down this light and put downward pointing lights. Accident rate plummeted. There's hardly an accident there per year now. 20
Mario,
per year.
was that light on the actual building or on?
Yes, it was
yeah.
on the building.
Okay, that's
Typical
okay.
wall.
Thank you.
Yeah, so they got rid of the wall pack and put a couple of shielded lights pointing down. Now you can actually see the school and you don't create accidents. The IAS likes to say that we need high CCT lighting so you can see down the street. Well, here is the high pressure sodium. You could see actually much further with them that were 1800 than you can with the 6000 or the 3500. So that's a fallacy. And the reason for that is the high CCT lighting blinds you and you don't see as well down the street. Here's another study. This one's done by Ron Gibbons and Alan Lewis, who are members of the IAS, but these are good guys. They actually know what they're talking about, and they just got to convince the rest of the engineers. And you can see that 2000, 3000, 6000, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference, except if you want to look off to the side. But, you know, you shouldn't be looking 30 feet off the road. And that's the only time it makes a difference. And here is the CCT color vision. Okay, the other thing you'll hear from lighting engineers, well, we need color. They never used to complain of that when it was high pressure sodium. The red is high pressure sodium. We lived with that for years. Notice there's hardly any difference between 5,000 and all the way down to 2,500, which is the black, okay? Any one of these gives you perfectly fine color vision, which, by the way, is completely irrelevant for driving. So myths of outdoor lighting. Eric, I stole this one from you, actually. Thank you. I was asked, anyways.
Please do, if you can use it, do so.
Thank you. And same with me. You use as many of mine as you want. So have wasted energy. This is where the good light is. This is what you want. You don't want to annoy your neighbors, and you don't want to waste all that energy. So a good light shines where you need it and is shielded, and everyone is happy. And you save. So bright lights, safe lights. How about streetlights on crime in Los Angeles? Their study, this is a good study. It had a long time being done. This was published in 2018. For every increase in LED intensity of 0.1, there was a 1% increase I'm sorry, for every 1% increase in LEDs, there was a 0.1% increase in property crime rates. Okay, and again, I challenge any lighting company, if they have data to disprove this or show anything different, I'm happy. I will guarantee you, I will show that, because I will show all data. 30 years, I've never gotten a response. Chicago Alley Lighting Project. This is a famous one. So in April 2000, Chicago got a grant. They thought they'd cut down on crime by lighting up all the alleyways. If you've ever been to Chicago, they have a lot of alleyways. They have 2 levels of streets and alleyways. So but they ran out 2/3 of the way through of money. So 2/3 of the alleyways were lit up, 1/3 were poorly lit up. So the University of Chicago thought, the Criminal Justice Authority and University of Chicago, this is a perfect way to prove that lights will cut down crime. Much to their chagrin, so they changed 175,000 lights. And they went from 90 watt to 250 watts, by the way. They really overlit these alleyways. Much to their chagrin, wherever was unlit, the crime rate went down. Wherever they lit up, the crime rate went up. Exactly proved the opposite of what they were trying to prove. They don't talk about it much.
Yeah, Mario, that last slide shows that the energy expense went up 3-fold.
Correct.
Or
Yeah, it's a waste of energy, and it didn't do what it's supposed to do, protect people, and the crime rate went up.
This was
Also like kids like Motts, they go where the lights are, actually. And here's another one, Journal of Quantitative Criminology. But basically, extra lighting increases crime. I didn't put these studies on because they're only anecdotes, really. But if you go and ask criminals in jail who've done crime, why did you break into this house versus that house? the answer invariably is the house that's all lit up with all these spotlights and all these lights and lights in every window is basically a neon light saying, I'm afraid of you. I've got a lot of expensive things. Please don't rob me. Okay. They're inviting the crime because of the excess lighting. And every person in jail pretty much says that. That's how they choose the houses that they, most crime, by the way, is in daytime when you're not in the house, not at night. Okay. So Queens, New York, put up, were any early adopters, put up 4,000 K lights. This is one of the worst light polluted areas in the country. You would admit that, right? So they changed them to 4,000 K lights. Immediately, the complaints started rolling in. This New York Times in 2017 said, we can't stand these. People just endless complaints. People don't realize how awful 4,000 K lights are until they have to live next to them. To the average person, 3,000, 4,000, oh, it's 25% more. No, it's far more blue, and blue light shines in your bedroom at night unless you have blackout curtains and keeps you up at night. So one lighting engineer at one of my lectures said, well, why can't people just put up blackout curtains? And my response to him was, well, why should the entire world spend extra money, not be able to open their windows because you're such a bad engineer? The crowd erupted in laughter and applause. So I think I won that. So there are a number of cities that now require 3,000 K or lower, and a number of states that now have light pollution laws. Florida is not one of them. Work on that. I should add that several cities, including Seattle and Pittsburgh, were early adopters around the year 2010 and put up 4,000 K lights. Because it's basically to save energy, not for light pollution reasons. They put up these 4,000, but they were unshielded and they're 4,000 K. People hate them. They don't even want to move into districts that have them up because they just look awful. So they finally voted that they're taking them all down. Seattle, 2-3 years ago now, they're taking every single one of the 4,000 K lights down. And on main thoroughfares, they're putting up 3,000 K, and on side streets, they're putting up 2,700 K. Pittsburgh voted the same thing last year. And they're not the only one. Oh, by the way, this is 3,000 K. Colors are fine. Not the only ones. Earlier, Davis, California voted to replace all the LED lights after neighbor complaints. Now, here's what makes this interesting. How many people will vote for a tax increase? I mean, that's almost impossible to get done, right? Davis put up bad lights. Town people hated him so much. The towns said, well, it'll cost money. It'll cost this much, and we don't have the taxes for that. They voted for a tax increase to take them down. That's how much people hate 4,000 K lights. Monterey sued their own city because they put up the wrong lights and they won. They got them to take them all down. Here is a 2,700 light near me, and it's very well lit, very evenly lit. These are shielded. You're just seeing the light bouncing off the bottom, and all the lights are pointing down. And you see a little glow off the fixture, but that's about it. Another thing you'll hear light engineers, because I've given so many lectures, I've heard all their excuses. Well, the moon is 4,000 K, so what's the problem? All right, so that's why I put this slide up. Here's an actual spectrum of the moon during full moon. Okay, and yes, it seems to peak around there, except for the fact, what's this big black spike here from the 4,000 K light that's not present in the 2,200 K light? Okay, that's the blue shine through of those LEDs. So with the lighting engineers, when they say it's just like moonlight, no, you're completely ignoring the blue. And it's a waste of energy. This is Trifid Nebula through my telescope. So I was on the Council on Science and Public Health, and I was given some leeway to advance some issues that I would like. But in order to get something passed through the AMA, you have to have lots of peer-reviewed papers, and then it gets sent out to 5 universities for academics to review it before it'll get adopted. And even after all that, you got to get the delegates to vote for it and approve it. So this is all policy now that I'm going to show you. This is way back in 2009. This is kind of a no-brainer. Shield the lights so you don't blind yourself. That was unanimous. No one fought that. 2012, we produced a paper with these fine gentlemen. These are all leaders in light pollution: Blast, Brainerd, Lockley, Ronald Gibbon, me, Stevens. We put together a paper, 36 pages long, 123 peer-reviewed references that showed, as far back as 2012, that light at night can damage health. This is why the AMA has guidelines, because it adversely affects human health. Okay, so we put out this paper, and it's suggested use of lower blue emission and that glare be limited. You know, after this, a few companies like the iPhone, Apple, the iPhone 6 months later started that thing where it eliminates the blue after 9 p.m. You can override that if you want, but it eliminates the blue. So a number of companies did take that. GE took that into account for some of their products as well. But the lighting company in general completely ignored all this. So in 2016, I was still on the council, we got this published. And this is, it was basically because the industry completely ignored the 2012 data. And around 2016, all the lighting companies were stocking up on LEDs because they were going to go to all these cities and say, you should replace your lights, you'll save money on electricity, which is true. And we say, go ahead and do that, but don't put up 4,000 K lights. So this is the now AMA policy that was peer-reviewed, 5 universities, number of academics, and then voted on. This was almost near unanimous by the delegates, by the way, that we use 3,000 K or lower. Now, in 2016, that was the best light available. There were no 2,700 or 2,200, excuse me. So we suggested you use 3,000 K, they'd be fully shielded, and that you take into account environmental and human effects. That's still policy. Nowadays, that would be 2,700. It does say 2,000, 3,000 or lower, looking to the future. But of course, no, even the people who grudgingly go along with this never realize the lower. The IS has a manual that basically they fought us tooth and nail when we published that at the AMA in 2016. In fact, the city of Chicago in 2016 was going to got a contract ready with Siemens that was going to replace all 275,000 lights in the city with lighting. They were going to put up 4,000 K lighting. AMA is based in Chicago. The city of Chicago pays attention to them. So they said, oh, this is interesting. Someone brought it to their attention. They didn't just go by that. They did their own research and brought it out to qualified engineers. So 4 months later, they rip up the contract. And well, actually what they did is they went to Siemens and said, we want to change the contract to 3,000 K lighting. Siemens bought millions of dollars worth of 4,000 K lighting cheaply from China. They didn't buy any 3,000 K lighting. So they lost a $1.1 billion contract because of this publication. Needless to say, to this day, if you mention my name to any executive in Siemens, you will get a string of swear words, I'm sure. I've saved some of the nasty emails I got from them. They're not happy with me. The IS also fought us tooth and nail, basically saying, you're a bunch of docs, stay in your lane. We're the lighting specialists. Anyways, they've gotten so much pushback through the years that their latest actually says very quietly that we should use 3000 K or lower, and we should fully shield them. This is a major revelation for the IAS. In fact, some of the people who were running the roads committee were quietly let go because they were fighting this so much. So the new one, which got published 2 years ago, now has the right information and now is pretty close to what the AMA recommends. Here's the problem, though. The average lighting consultant never got a degree in lighting. They got a degree in civil engineering or something else, or electrical engineering. There's only 5 universities in the entire country that gives a lighting degree. So most of them are engineers who got into lighting. And they may buy a manual, say back in the year 2000 when they started their business, and never updated it. So in some town council, you may hear a lighting engineer, well, I got my manual here, and it doesn't say anything like that. It says 4,000, 5,000 K is perfectly fine. At that point, you should raise your hand and saying, what year is yours published? And if they say anything before 2022, say, why don't you buy the latest one, which completely negates everything you just said. I've used that line a couple of times in some council meetings as I watched the lighting engineer turn red in the face. Blue lights, that's the problem. How much time do I have, by the way?
Just go ahead.
Okay, so blue light causes the harm. And I think I already talked about that. So let's move on. This is M51. So I got assigned to Dark and Quiet Skies for Science and Technology. That is a UN committee. I represented the AMA. This came about because the professional astronomers were concerned that their observatories were going to become obsolete with all the light pollution. But then it expanded from that to include satellite proliferation and environmental damage and human health. And I got put on, so this is the thing they did. I got put on Section 5. And here is what the UN and the AMA is saying now. Because of the circadian clock, clock controlled, damaging that cycle is damaging to human health. So let's go through just a couple of things it does. It interferes with your sleep. You get less sleep, and that leads to psychiatric problems and depression. And it also increase obesity because lecithin gets affected with less melatonin as well. So back in 1990, Richard Stevens theorized shift workers would be at higher risk. Makes sense, right? Blind women would be at lower risk. Lighted bedrooms increase risk, and long sleep lowers risk. That was his predictions if everything he assumed was correct. Since then, every one of those has been proven true with multiple studies. So I don't know how they did this, but they went around the world and found twins, same genes, twins. One woman is blind and one woman can see properly. In the US, the seeing woman has 1.75 times the rate of cancers than the blind woman. Sweden, same study. Finland, same study. Norway, same study. So with the number of people, I think there's now 700 or 800 twins. Hard for me to believe they found that many people, but those are the numbers. The IRC model for proof of causation. You know, you remember the 1960s when the tobacco companies were saying epidemiology is a farce, and basically that, you know, cigarettes don't cause harm. Well, they were basing it on the fact that epidemiology is a group for smoking is a group 2A, probably carcinogen. And the reason it's probably is not everyone develops a cancer. Benzene, if you inhale benzene every day, you will develop a cancer. That's a group 1 carcinogen. But smoking, only about 1/3 develop cancer. So it's a probable carcinogen group 2A. I mean, no one now doubts that smoking causes cancer, but that's the level of causation based on epidemiology. You know what the lighting level of causation is? Group 2A.
Right.
Same level of proof as smoking. Here's a paper that Richard Stevens, Brainerd, and myself, we were the first people to publish on the Journal of Cancer on lighting effects. So light pollution and cancer. Increased incidence of metabolic disorders, mood disorders, and cancer. This is a review article, and I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly just to show you that there are multiple papers that demonstrate this. Melatonin buffers the immune system, okay? Acts as a stimulant on the basal immunosuppressive conditions or an anti-inflammatory compound. Melatonin, immune function and aging. Unfortunately, you diminish that as you get older, which is why you're more likely to get a cancer in 70s and 90s. Your immune system isn't as robust anymore. Melatonin on immune system and cancer, and this is in Journal Clinical Cancers. Melatonin elicits an oncostatic property in a variety of different tumor cells. And this is interesting. A number of studies have documented melatonin given in combination with chemotherapy to people with cancer increases the overall survival rate and reduces toxic side effects. So that's a common practice now by oncologists. Light at night and risk of breast cancer. This is a review of 17 papers. So a huge number of people, dose-related, investigating outdoor lighting with comparable exposure shows a linear relationship up to 40 nanowatts per centimeter squared, after which the curve flattened. Now, how do you do that? You look at satellite images on Earth and see where the light pollution is, and then you correlate that with zip codes. And notice this is outdoor lighting, not indoor lighting, okay? If you just have a few thousand people, it's hard to prove that. But when you get studies that have hundreds of thousands of people, any difference of indoor lighting tends to even out. So then it really becomes just the outdoor lighting. And multiple studies have shown that the light that shines in your bedroom, which is higher in urban areas than suburban areas, than rural areas, you have a linearly increased rate of cancers. Outdoor light at night in Black and white women in Southern community. Again, same thing. So here's the one I like best because I had a partial hand in this one. The Women's Nurses Study followed 110,000 women from 1989, to 2013. And they studied a number of things. They just wanted to see what popped out. Breast cancer popped out, and it popped out in relationship to their zip code. So what was different with their zip code? Outdoor lighting. Most of these women did not have blackout shades, so the light shines in your bedroom, especially if you're in an urban or well lit up suburban area. And they had they broke it up into fifths. Okay, the fifth that was the most lit up in the streets had a 14% increase in breast cancer compared to the most rural area. And there was a stepwise increase depending on how much outdoor lighting there was around their house. Unless you think that's an outlier, here's 15 studies saying the exact same thing. Here's one from Spain just recently. This one's from the US, Israel, Connecticut, worldwide study, South Korea. When you have now millions of people showing the exact same thing, this is pretty solid evidence. And they all say the same thing, by the way. So here's an interesting study by Dr. Blask from Tulane. It's one of my favorite studies because it is really dramatic. Nude mice are a special mouse, nude rats, I should say, a special rat that's bred to accept transplants. What he did is he took human breast cancer and put it under the skin of 120 nude rats. And then he took 20 of them and had them, where's my mouse? Oh, here we go. Had them have a normal daylight cycle with completely dark at night. This is the rate at which the breast cancer in the mouse grew. 0.02 microwatts per centimeter squared, a minimal amount of light. This is less light that'll come in through your light, through your shades, or especially if you have a night light, it's much higher. Look at what happened. The rate of breast cancer in these mice rose faster. 0.05, this is about a nightlight, grows faster. 0.08, well lit outside, shining in your bedroom at night. And then finally, constant light. The poor little rats had the breast cancer literally explode out of their chest. Okay, dramatic study, been reproduced, and it was just well done. I really like this study. You can't do that with human volunteers, right? Anyone volunteer to have a human breast cancer implanted in you? No. So this is what we have to go by. Light at night, increase in pancreatic cancer. This is a relatively new study, 27% increase. It's a hormonally related cancer, and this is from Texas. Thyroid cancer, 50% increase, 55% increase, also from the University of Texas. Published in the American Cancer Society. Outdoor light at night increases obesity in the environmental health. And of course, if you're going to increase obesity, you're going to have increased diabetes risk. But there's also a lecithin hormone problem there. So you have 12 to 19% higher odds of developing obesity if you live in a light polluted area. Cerebrovascular disease. This is a brand new study, just came out, 2024. So risk of cerebrovascular disease. I've been wondering for years if it increases strokes, but there were no good studies. Here's the first one. Basically 1.17% risk if you live in a light polluted area. Not hemorrhagic stroke, by the way. Hemorrhagic stroke is by weak vessels that burst. But ischemic stroke, which is blocked vessels, which is from increased, basically lipitor, I'm sorry, cholesterol and buildup of plaque. And of course, if you build up plaque, you're going to have increased rates of heart disease. It's all related. Carotid atherosclerosis, consequence of excessive illumination on the retina can damage the retina. Okay. And lighting damage the retinal pigment if you're constantly exposed to it. This is outdoor light at night. This is one of my favorite planetaries. It's in Cygnus. No, it's actually in Aquila, NGC 6781. So environmental impacts from land. I'm sure this will pique your interest. I won't spend as much time. I'm not an expert on this, but I do read many of the studies. It affects plants, everything from trees to crop yields, insects, pollination, reproduction, birds, fish, even in the water, and affects 60% of invertebrates and 30% of vertebrates. Travis Slancourt is the expert. He's at the University of Southern California. If you Google him, you'll see a lot of his papers. Here is a paper in Nature in 2018, and I love the way he ended the paper. It's a direct quote. This is the last sentence in that paper. If an lighting environmental effect on a particular species has not yet been documented, it's probably because it has not yet been studied. In every case where a study has been performed, an effect has been determined. So what he's saying is, if you find a species that doesn't have a paper on it, it's just because no one studied it yet. Because every time he studies it, there is an effect on nature. It's pervasive. Light pollution. This is way back from 2004. He's been doing this a long time, but affects animals' orientation, interspecific interactions with natural patterns, and artificial light will probably affects prey and predator interactions. Mammals expand the time of birth. They usually try to be born at a certain time when the plants are producing, or with their food sources. It changes that. Fishes, it affects their luteinizing hormone. That actually makes more females in some fish and more males in others. Birds, reproductive seasonality changes by a month. Insects reduce pheromone quantity and quality. Plants, early bud bursts unrelated to temperature, and then they die. And lights travel sideways very widely. So this is 50 miles away. If you have 5,000 K lights, you're going to see it 50 miles away because it travels so far, whereas 2,700 is much less.
Dr. Motta,
Yes.
we have a lot of interesting questions in the chat, and I'd
Okay.
like to
I
be
only
sure
have
to
4
try
more
to get
slides.
to
If I
them.
can just finish.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go
So,
ahead.
no, not a problem at all. And I'll stop when, say it again and I'll just stop. Light pollution is a driver of insect declines. We're in an insect apocalypse. I was at a conference a few years back where there was an entomologist who was speaking just before me, and I'm intrigued by his paper. Why is your windshield clean? That was the title of his paper. And I thought about it. He's right. 40 years ago when I was driving, I had to clean my windshield all the time. Now I never have to. Why? We've killed them all off. There are 40% less insects on Earth than there were 40 years ago. Insect declines in agrisystem. It affects our pollination, which is our food, by the way. Here's Susquehanna River. All those are mayflies, which should become fish food, and they should be pollen. They should be laying eggs in the water. Instead, they congregate under this light and just die and become a useless mess. Bird deaths in Florida. Anyone there remember that along the York coast, the East Coast, that they used to think that it was that was toxins and pollutants that caused the decline of turtles? Eric, I believe it was a researcher in your institution, right, who figured it out. It was the fact that lights are shining on the beach just because people like to see, in case they get up at night to urinate, they want to be able to see the water. I can't think of any other reason. And when the turtles hatch, they go to where the light is, which is on the street rather than the water. And then they get off.
That's right.
Yep. So they passed the law. You can't shine lights on the beach. Turtle populations bouncing back. Lightning bugs. If you don't have male and female lightning bugs see each other, you get no baby lightning bugs. Here's one of my favorite, Chinook Run, which is salmon, place in northern, I forget if it's southern Oregon or northern California, but it's in that area. Someone thought it would be a great idea to put lights under the bridge so you can see it from the town far away. Okay, what happened is salmon normally go up the river, and in 2005, there were 15,000 salmons in the run. They put in LED lights. Within 2 years, the salmon population collapsed. Why? Salmon will not cross the lit up bridge. Someone finally figured it out. They shut off the lights during the salmon run. The salmon population has bounced back. Things that you would not expect to even think about are affected. Light pollution and free living birds, it affects them greatly. Anyone know that the pyramid in Las Vegas, they have that huge light going up? Here's a dirty little secret. They actually have a team to sweep up all the dead birds at the base every morning. Why? Because the birds circle that intense beam and then just drop dead from exhaustion, and they sweep up the birds so people aren't shocked when they go in to gamble later in the day. And here's one for Florida. Okay, plankton eat algae. We have algae blooms along the Florida coast all the time, probably primarily because of agriculture and runoff of nutrients. But you have these algae blooms. You know what eats algae? Plankton. You know what plankton abhors? Lights. So you have all this plankton along the shore. The plankton will not rise. This is a great migration every night. They will not rise and eat the algae if the coast is lit up. That's contributing to the plankton to the algae blooms, believe it or not. So, you know, again, the least things you'd least expect, trees. If this tree is lit up with this light up over here, the tree produces a hormone saying keep your leaves. This part of the tree that doesn't see the light produces a hormone saying drop your leaves, stresses the tree. Trees die in half as much their lifespan, is Purdue University study that shows that. I would like to live in excellent sky. Let me skip over this picture of the Milky Way, what it should look like, and how many stars you lose. Let me just skip through that. Responsible outdoor lighting at night, that's a European initiative, and I was involved with that as well. Here's Saturn, something you'll recognize through my scope. NGC 4565, one of my favorite galaxies. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Doctor. It was an excellent presentation. We have a lot of great questions, and I'm going to try to get through as many as possible. I do have one question to the group relating to the Sierra Club-Loxahatchee group, and that is if you would put in the chat how you heard about tonight's meeting, because we want to try to get our message out to our members and supporters in the most direct way possible. So, moving on to questions to the doctor. And actually, this is from me. I'm not sure how the how we got streetlights on I-95 the whole way from Martin County to Miami. I mean, it's continuous, and with cars all coming with headlights, two headlights, even if you blow a headlight, you can still drive if there weren't streetlights.
Correct. The Department of Transportation only requires lighting on intersection off-ramps and on-ramps. There is absolutely no reason for street lights along major highways. It doesn't do it. There are no pedestrians. There's no on and off for buildings. So this is basically just a sales job by the lighting company.
Gotcha.
Waste of electricity.
Another question, does FP&L recognize light pollution as a health problem?
No. I've been as I said, Florida Power and Light has been one of the least responsive, in my opinion, of all the lighting companies in the country. You got to work on them.
Do we need to ask them to do something? Do we need to send them some of your papers?
Tell them to do what 48 other states have done and stop putting up 3,000 K lights instead of 4,000 K lights and shield them.
Gotcha.
They're the outliers, not the rest of the country anymore. The three bad states are North Carolina, Florida, and Texas.
Huh, well, that makes sense. Well, no, it doesn't. But anyway, does the lack of melatonin lead to clinical depression?
Yes.
Someone else, Eric, indicated criminals need light to commit their crimes.
Yes.
That's why so many of the activities occur during daytime as well as
Correct. 85% of burglaries in our house are daytime. And shining your lights in the daytime won't help you at all.
So what specifically should we be asking our government officials for on streetlights? Yes, shielded, 2,700. I think that's an extra zero there, or.
No, 2,700, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, 2,700 or less. The AMA policy is 3,000 or lower, but that's because it was 2016. Nowadays, we even got 2,400, and an even better solution in Quebec, they're producing amber LED lights, which I've seen. They're actually quite good. They have no blue whatsoever, but they're only produced by one company in Quebec. Hopefully that'll catch on. Completely eliminates the blue, and it gives darn good light.
Okay, is there a wattage? Or that's irrelevant, it's the K.
Well, you know, the lighting companies will use light meters, but what you've got to avoid is in general, you're replacing lights almost always these days, not putting up a new light. So if you're replacing a 60-watt high pressure sodium, it should be 15-watt, and just do the math that way. But unfortunately, they every time they replace the light, they replace it with far too high wattage. And then the amount of blue you're getting is almost the same as if it's a 3000 K, just because of the amount of light. And the intense light causes veiling discomfort. So you have a problem. So it should be appropriate amount of light, only where it's needed, and it should be shielded.
Okay. Some of the questions I think in the chat may have been answered by other folks in the room, so I'll go through just for your verification. There was a question of, this is all very interesting, but how do you know it was light pollution and not different diets or other factors that led to more cancer in the US than, say, Europe?
Because, for example, I'll take the nurses study, 110,000 women. These are nurses who are quite educated about health issues, and they were grilled every year about their health habits, and everything was matched, and there was a progressive stepwise increase from light polluted area to rural area where there was no light pollution. So when you hit numbers that high and you match any smoking habits, diets, they're all matched with the controls, then the only obvious conclusion is the light coming in. And again, it's not just that one study. There are now 33 studies done the same way around the world. They all say the same thing.
Okay, there was a lot of chat about the sea turtle lighting. And then another question came up, is there any evidence between lighting and our reefs in the water? And I don't know, maybe that
Yes,
falls
there is.
into
I didn't put
your,
that slide in, but if there's coral close to shore, they don't grow well. Okay, they don't release their what do you call them? They're not eggs, but the polyps, I think they're called. They don't release them, and the
Gametes, I believe the term is gametes.
okay, thank you, Vera. So, anyways, they tend to die when it's well lit.
okay, I think that is quite a few of the questions in the chat. Richard's got his hand up. If anyone would like to ask a in-person question, and then we'll be heading toward the mystery question. Richard, you're muted, so you're going to have to unmute.
I'm sorry. So regarding amber lighting, there's two types of amber lighting. One is monochromatic, and the other is narrow band.
Well, that's the same thing. The amber lighting that they are producing in Quebec is the same manufacturing technique as the blue LEDs to make them white. They're coated with phosphors, and it's just that it's amber instead of blue that diffuses the light. So it's a broad spectrum LED light. But the narrow spectrum are most people find objectionable because it's too monochromatic.
So narrow spectrum is the broad spectrum. Is that called PC? Amber PC?
Yes.
Yeah. And then I was going to say, in addition to that, that we talked about.
By the way, since you brought that amber light up, in Quebec, they actually paid everyone, including farmers, to replace their lights. They said, we'll give them to you free. So they replaced all the lights on the barns with the amber lights instead of the high pressure lights and the LED lights that they've had. And you know what happened? The cows produced 25% more milk. Completely unexpected, but even the cows are happy.
What's the name of the city? or town?
Sherbrooke, Quebec. So there's an observatory there. They wanted to protect it. That's why they did it. But now everyone's so happy with them, they're expanding.
Oh, they weren't doing it for the increased milk production.
I have no idea why they produce more milk, but I'm just pointing out even the cows are happy.
Yeah. And then, so just to sum things up, we have the color temperature of lighting, the lumens, the amount of unneeded lumens that we may be generating through.
Yeah, you don't want to overlight.
Yep. And then the third leg of that is the shielding. The shielding's extremely important.
Yep. Put it where you need it, shield it, and use the lowest CCT you can get by with. And it's really that simple. It's not a difficult thing to solve.
Would you say that like for like say a suburban or urban environment that the Palm Beach County is comprised of, would cities be able to, if they were just starting from scratch, would they be able to do 2400 and still have
Yeah,
like,
those are now readily available.
they're not?
Most cities are doing 2,700. Some are doing 3,000 still. And there are a few cities, and there's a couple in Massachusetts, more rural areas, they've put up 2,400. People are very happy with them.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay, Lisa, your hand is up and you are unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question was, does taking melatonin supplements help moderate the effects of light pollution
No.
for people?
I mean, it'll help you sleep. That's pretty well known. Whether it helps prevent cancer, unfortunately, that study, there's a couple of studies on with that, but there's no proof as of this time that taking extra melatonin will help you prevent breast cancer. That there is a study, as I showed you, it's actually several, that if you use it with chemotherapy, it improves the chemotherapeutic effect that I showed. But there's no study that I can say taking extra melatonin help prevent hormonally related cancers as of now.
Okay,
Come
thank you.
back in a few years, maybe we'll have that.
Okay, Rhonda, you've got your hand up and yep, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much. This is so interesting. I was curious about how this works for people who work nights.
Yeah, well, that's why you're at higher risk because your circadian rhythm is always affected. It's not as bad as if you have a particular, like say you work every night for the rest of your life, not as bad a problem, but I assume you don't do that. So if you have a changing schedule like many nurses do, a policeman, that puts you at higher risk. It's about a 15% higher risk of developing hormonally related cancer.
Thank you.
Okay, one other question came into the chat, and that it was about the shielding, which you said, it almost sounds like just shielding the light source would be so beneficial. But the question actually was, does shielding mean aiming down or
Yes.
just shielding the glare? So you're not seeing the
Well, it
light.
does both. It does both. You prevent the glare, but you know, there's an added benefit here. Let's say it took 60 watts to light up that area of the street properly with an unshielded light, knowing that you're losing about 50% of the light going sideways and up. Put a shield on it with a reflector on the inside, all that light's going down. Now you got twice as much light as you started. So now you have the added benefit of cutting the wattage in half and you get the same amount of light on the ground.
Okay, and Drew, your hand is up and you're muted, so unmute. And this might need to be the last question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Motta. Really great presentation. My questions relate to sea life and the reefs and the sea turtles, and that is that they require moonlight. In fact, I think reefs require a certain amount of moonlight in the gestation process. And
Yeah.
I'm just curious, how does this affect moonlight when you have too much lighting?
Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. They tend to hatch during full moon, and then when they see the moonlight bouncing off the water, which is the brightest thing in their environment, when they crawl out of the sand, they go to where that light is. They're programmed that way, as you know, if you're a marine biologist, as you say. So if you have street lights or porch lights in the back of the house pointing to the sand that are brighter than the moon, they're going to go to the brightest source. They won't go to the water. Okay, but a dim light like a window light won't be as much of a problem, but these spotlights are a major problem, and street lights are a major problem.
Okay. Well, thank you, Dr. Motta. Excellent presentation. It's time for the mystery question to win a green Sierra Club hat. So we're going to ask everybody to put their answer into the chat. So Dr. Motta, if you look at the chat, and the first person that gets the right answer in the chat is going to win. And the question is, correct me if I'm wrong, the question is, what is it about melatonin is even more important than getting people to sleep at night?
Yes. Hopefully that's obvious now.
Yeah, we've got people putting it in the chat. Okay, doctor, what do you think? We've got prevents cancer, immune boosting.
I would say immune boosting is the most correct answer.
Okay, well,
Looks like Lisa's happy. I can see her waving her hand.
I think Lisa's happy. Okay, well, thank you for playing our game, everyone. And thank you for a wonderful presentation. We're going to try to practice our Zoom skills, everybody. Can everybody give Dr. Motta a round of applause? Everybody remember where that is? Or a thumbs up, or fireworks, or unmute yourself and say thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Awesome
Motta.
job.
Sure, my
Thank you.
pleasure to be with you. Now all you guys got to work on your cities and the Florida Power and Light. Get them to come around.
Thank you very
All right,
much.
Dr. Motta.
Thank you.
Okay, take care. I'll sign off now.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining. Thank you for the presentation.
Sure. Send me a
Um,
link when you put it up. You said you were going to put it.
Yep. Yep. And
Thank you.
I am going to stop the recording.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.